my wife's light downstairs, but it's not gonna happen. I'm
It's
like,
fine.
it's too far. I'll just stay dark. I mean,
No,
come
I
on,
hear you.
it's 10:19 your time, East Coast, clearly at an hour.
Oh
But
yeah,
it's all good though. So we'll definitely have to keep this an hour. And other people can catch up when they want to catch up. That's for
yeah.
sure.
We'll see
You
if
know,
people get engaged too.
so as we kind of get into it, something I found so interesting. People are so chatty on Twitter, but not in a bad way. I found tonight. Maybe it was just where I was originally. So
Hang on, I'm gonna have to log into Twitter for a second because that's too good for me to believe. I have to see that for
it was for
myself.
me. I
Twitter
don't know
being
why.
nice,
Look. I don't know what was going on tonight with
man.
just the Twitterverse, but it actually was decent tonight. I was like, oh, you know how it goes. Like I'm so interested. I want to see what people have to say, and then you hope, like, a little sass is good. I like a little sass, but some people just take it like way above and beyond. And people were actually I say, like, pretty fair tonight. I don't know. That's just me. That's just me. But listen, while we're here, look, this is not going to be like a 2 hour podcast tonight. I just don't think we could work with
No,
it and
yeah,
deal with
no.
it.
It's definitely gonna be an hour. Tim Ryan looks like the guy in a zombie movie who's trying to hide the fact he's been bitten. That's a
Yo,
good.
that was
That's a
too
good
that was
tweet.
too funny to me. Like
Yeah.
I could not stop laughing at it. But anyway, so why we just move on through. So let's just keep it simple. So tonight we just wanted to get together real quick. The debates. Hopefully you all got to watch it, right? Regardless, like how you feel, which side it's on. Like I would have to say I feel more inspired now to pay attention to stuff than ever before. But for you, and again, feel free for the comments for those of you. Again, we know it's late at night. Feel free to share. But Jeremy, I'll just start by asking you, why do you believe that you should spend your precious time even watching these things to begin with?
That's a great question. Um, I'm in debate mode right now. Let me start by nailing the issues down. Now, it's a good question because there's a lot of people out there who don't really get involved in politics naturally. That's something that
Yeah, because most of us
more in
hate
the
it.
last 4 years because of what we've seen from the 2016 election and what led up to that. Just the turnout for voter primary in the Republican Party, and then also the Democratic Party last 2016 election was record high. People are starting to see more than just the normal politics behind what President of the United States represents. Donald Trump has done a lot of really unfortunate things and a lot of negative things, despite how you may feel about what's happened. The facts are out there. He's
Hmm.
created a lot of negative connotations around the White House. However, if nothing else, he provided an outlet where Americans finally got interested in politics, and
Yeah, you got to give him
24-hour
that.
news
Look, love
coverage
him or hate him, you
is
got to give him that.
yeah, 24-hour news coverage is now it's focused a lot around the political arena now than ever, and so yeah, the question of why should I spend my time to do it? Well, so for me, it's goes back to my civil duty as an American to vote, right? So if I'm
Okay.
voting for one of these candidates, and in some states, in the state of Texas, I would vote in the primary of the party that I'm affiliated, I believe. But there's some states that it's not the case. That you, as a Republican, would be able to vote in the Democratic primary. So there's a lot of people out there who will see one of these candidates. I believe one of the candidates on the stage tonight, as opposed to the stage tomorrow night. It's very early to tell, but I think you'll see one of these candidates going against Donald Trump in
Hmm.
2020 and in the lead up to 2020 from pretty much all of 2020, the entire year, a better part of the year rather, will be spent in that period of discussion of Donald Trump versus X. And so, this is the first real chance that we've got to see who that's going to be and really get a grasp for what that platform is made of that they're standing on.
Hmm.
I think that's the nuts and bolts of it. Is it's just your responsibility to be educated when you go to the polls, and more importantly than being educated, also being, to your point, motivated or passionate about the decision that you're making. There's nobody felt very passionate, I would say, in 2016 going to the polls. We have a very specific responsibility to make sure that that doesn't happen in this election. And Democrats specifically have an opportunity to elect somebody who is not just going to defeat Donald Trump, but also somebody who's going to stand up for some of the issues that Donald Trump has fought so hard to put down.
Yeah, and I guess like if I were to answer the question, for me, I pay attention to it now because I would say for the longest time, I hate to say like it was kind of like a boring thing, right? Like I couldn't say I actually looked at it from like a civic duty, right? I'm like, okay, cool, like I guess every 4 years, go vote for president, right? And you kind of like, all right, let me poll my family members and my friends. Let me see what's up real quick, and I'll do like a little research and I'll make a decision, right? And I actually was split. This is the first election that kind of forced me off the path, but I was split. Like in my lifetime since I was 18, I voted Republican twice, and then I voted a Democrat twice until this last election. Then the Democrat is what threw it over for me. And so, again, I hate to say like I don't want to applaud like the situation we're in that said, hey, maybe you should pay attention to this sort of thing and be a little bit more active. But at the same time, to kind of find that silver lining, I just think it's important to do because people should be paying attention, right? Like we're quick to blame others for everything. And I just say that like in general as a species, right? It's just mankind, like something else is always someone else's or some other situation's fault. And so now I'm looking at it from the perspective of, okay, wait a minute, like I'm cool with, right? And I would even be cool with, again, no matter what happens with the upcoming election, if it turns out that people, still the majority of people, vote the other way, right, and we get Trump again for 4 years, my thing is, if everybody shows up and everybody votes and that's what we get, then that's what we get, right? Like, love or hate it.
Yeah.
But, I'm also under the impression, like, I don't want to just sit there and be that individual that complains about everything but never gets active, right? And uses excuse one way or another, no matter which side you're on. Oh, again, it's someone else's fault, or my vote or my voice doesn't count. And that couldn't be further from the truth. So I just find, to your point, and I came to that situation later in life, that look, it's everyone's civic duty to just be involved, know, and make the decision that you feel is best for you, your family, whatever reasons, whatever motivates you, right? And I'm not here to judge that. I may judge some ideas. I may not like some ideas. I may not like some of the causes and whatnot that other people may stand for, but I make it a point that you got to separate that from the person. I don't believe that always is the indicator of the person. And so that's for me at least why I pay attention to it. Again, for those who may be watching, I'm always curious to know what motivates you to pay attention to fall. Maybe you didn't watch it tonight. Maybe you're like, okay. And again, a prior thing to me is it's boring. I don't necessarily care. I'm not going to pay attention to it. And look, it's your prerogative. But I hope that people will be inspired to say, okay, wait a minute. Like we should be paying attention to these things a bit more, regardless who's in office, right? Like the one thing that has to stand is we can't say, oh, I'm going to pay attention now, and then if, let's say, the person I like, gets appointed, then I'm just going to fall to the wayside and not care and not be engaged anymore. And I think we have to be engaged from this moment on.
Well, yeah, and the debate arena is something that you get introduced to at a young age in school, and debate club or something, some discussion in your social studies class. And what we saw this debate was the first, or it was the second, rather, from the last round of 20 presidential Democratic hopefuls back in Miami. But this is the first couple of instances that we've seen where physically presidents are debating for a spot in the White House, candidates are debating for a spot in the White House since the 2016 election. And during the 2016 election, the conversation was not about the issues of the debate. It was about who is a better of the worst candidates possible. Is it Hillary Clinton, who could be criminal, could be, responsible for the death of 13 men in Benghazi, could be dealing with Saudi Arabia, all of these things that were being thrown out there as far as, her involvement with some of the speculations out there. And then you had Donald Trump, who the book wrote itself on what Donald Trump was known for during the election, for comments like maybe the Second Amendment people can do something about it. I could choose somebody on Fifth Avenue and not lose a single voter. That was the new norm of political debates and political discussion, were these two horrible candidates who had no real platforms. I mean, you could argue Hillary Clinton had some kind of platform, but it was so overshadowed by the story and the headline and the actual the sound bites and the clips of the memes, the gifs, all of it was so overwhelmingly more significant to those debate stages than the actual conversation. So it is refreshing to see something different from that. It's also exciting because when I see these people going head to head and talking about real issues, I'm starting to actually see some progression, some things that maybe there could be changes in how we govern as a nation, how we approach things. Okay. College loan forgiveness, Medicare for all, having gun reform, having immigration reform based around not criminalizing the borders, but decriminalizing the borders to those seeking asylum. These are all issues that we get to think about, but we don't get to talk about or visualize because of who's in the White House. And if you're a Democrat, you're probably enjoying these conversations because you do get to have that vision. You do get to share in that revelation that, hey, maybe things could be different. But for me personally, I'm more excited about the fact that these people will have to talk about these issues on a stage against a man who has no interest talking about these issues. And it's going to really highlight the fact that for the last 3 years, we have had a soundbite president. We've had a president that lived on that debate stage, and the only reason won the election was because of how terrible of a candidate he was up against. So in my mind, I think it's a significant time with this 2020 election because everything around Donald Trump in politics has been a carbon copy of what not to do in the future for a lot of reasons. But also, it's been a really telling story, a lesson on what happens when you don't listen to history. And so in 2020, we have a chance to actually listen to history. We have a chance to really take a step and say, we're not going to stand for this. We're not going to make the same mistake twice. We're not going to put somebody out there who has no political background just because they're going to challenge the system. We're not going to put up Kevin Yang, who's going to guarantee $1,000 to everybody per month. Like we're not going to make that same mistake twice because we know how important this is. And this round of debates, that was the first time that I actually got to see that and revel in the fact that he's going to have to go toe-to-toe with them, and he's probably not going to do
Which,
very
by
well.
the way, just a little side thought here, that hashtag Yang Gang. Look, I can't say like I'm on that train, but I will say like he's actually a very interesting person to listen to. If you ever catch like Kara Swisher's podcast, man, like the guy's brilliant. I got to give him that. He's definitely smart. He has very interesting ideas. Again, I don't know if I can go along with all of it per se, but the guy's definitely thinking. He's definitely proposing some things that normally I don't think we'd really be talking about. So I found that to be very interesting. But okay, so first up, I got to ask, right? Just going in, who do you felt that started strong out of the gate?
Starting strong, I liked Elizabeth Warren. I thought she had a good opening argument. She started the debate with she set the tone. She said, if you're not willing to make these adjustments, if you're not willing to actually stand by these policies, then it's the cowardice of the GOP that's actually causing you to do that. It's you being a coward to the establishment.
Yeah, she definitely came with some fire.
I mean, that set the stage right there, literally, for people to say, oh, well, everything I do that goes against, that might go in favor of some of these things that we're seeing now, that goes against those progressive Democratic politics of Senator Sanders and Warren, may be considered to be spineless or weak. It was a very interesting tactic. I respected it and appreciated it because they both did very well tonight.
Yeah, it's it's going to be interesting to see long term, how this turns out for her. But I mean, I think she really brought in the fire with that. I was actually going to pull up one of the quotes that she mentioned, and I was just like, I was very surprised at it, right? Because she's pretty much like, what are you running for president for, basically? Yes. If you're going to be too afraid to make some of these decisions and really go in, then why are you even here? Yeah. And to your point, I have to agree, that really set the tone. I mean, clearly the crowd loved it and understood it. And then when I was paying attention to Twitter, I was like, okay, let me kind of sit down here and see what people think. And I mean, all I saw was a bunch of fire emojis and whatnot. So she definitely set the tone there. I know you're probably going to take a look, but if you haven't seen it, some of the comments that were made, there was a few good ones tonight. I have to say that came across. I feel like almost all the candidates had at least one interesting thing that they really sprung home. But I have to say, starting out of the gate, Elizabeth Warren was definitely fire. And I think she somewhat maintained it. I mean, she didn't have a lot of the spotlight tonight, that's for sure. But I like the idea that she's fiery, she's smart, she's quick. That's for sure. And so when you think that there's going to be other times to debate, especially when we start cross-referencing between the two major parties, she's definitely going to be able to hold her own. There's going to be zero doubts about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I see some of the comments just as they're trickling in here on this post. Warren is weak, would lose period, even as a running mate. I don't agree with that. I think that's I'm not going to accuse anybody of sexism or anything like that, but I think that's just our understanding of what politics is as a mainly masculinity dominated arena, and having somebody with Sanders' sort of background and some of the ideas that she comes out with. There's nothing weak about. I'm sorry, not Sanders, Warren. There's nothing weak about Elizabeth Warren. She is very strong in the Senate. She's been very strong in the Senate for a long, long time, and I don't think that there would be any candidate that would want to go toe to toe in a debate against Elizabeth Warren. The numbers I'm looking at here says that she had the most speaking time as well, which usually shows somebody who commanded the most speaking time. It's not by accident that happens in these kind of debates, these panel debates. But yeah, if not Warren, I would say the other one that did well was right beside her was Bernie Sanders.
Oh, for
and
sure.
Bernie Sanders is a guy that he has the identity, he has the notoriety and the recognition amongst voters because of his success against Hillary Clinton in the Democratic primaries 4 years ago. So I do think that there is a chance that somehow he and Elizabeth Warren both got a little bit stronger in these debates. As I start to see the field narrow, the names that come out of this one, I would say Pete Buttigieg.
For sure.
Buttigieg is another one. The one that really disappointed me in both of the debates from Miami and in Detroit was Beto O'Rourke, because he had so much to live up to. And, I think his start in Miami was just so rough. It kind of looked like when you see a team that gets out of the regular season on top, they dominated the whole thing, and then they get that first week bye in the playoffs, and they come out in the championship game, and they're just stale. There's a little rust to get off there.
Like our Atlanta Falcons, where you start off really strong, you're like a supercharger, and you just die off on the top end.
Yeah. So you start off really, he started off in his campaign, did well, didn't win that campaign, but he did show a lot of people a lot about Democrats in Texas. And then he came out on the debate stage in Miami, and it was just kind of flat, and he had to come out and do something today. I don't think he did that. I would see his numbers start to go down a little bit more. And Beto O'Rourke may have been the flash in the pan that I was afraid that he might be, just because I was really hopeful that he would be one of those grassroots campaigns that would motivate people to, as the Democratic Party sort of stands for that campaign finance of grassroots campaigns and not taking money from super PACs, being one of those Sanders or Warren types where he's going to raise money organically, stand up against, and I thought he would have done well in an election against Donald Trump with this identity. But I'll let you talk about this one. Marianne Williamson.
She was my surprise tonight. Look, she was my surprise tonight. Look, okay, so let me just be straightforward. The first time I heard her, I was like, okay, where has this lady come from, right? Never heard of her. Who are you? How did you get on this stage, right? And, she kind of had, this little hippie vibe or whatnot, which I personally, appreciate. It's refreshing just to hear, in general, she seems like a very kind-hearted individual, right? And you're like, I'm not so sure politics is for you. But at the same time, the more she actually started to talk here and there, the more I kind of raised my eyebrow, okay, wait a minute, she has some valid points here, right? For instance, just to kind of try to think of some examples off the top of my head of some things she said tonight. I thought it was very interesting of when she talked about doing the math and just really bringing out some of the true divide, right? And highlighting it, not shying away from it, some of the issues that we are kind of secretly known for. We pretend it's the country's past when it comes to races or anything else. But she just blew the gates wide open and discussed a few things. And a lot of people, especially in the African American community, were just whoa, did she just go there? In a positive way though, right? Yeah. She just really blew it up of no, this is not some sort of financial aid. This is some debt owed, right? And kind of going back on that. So I thought it was very interesting. And then there was one other interesting thing she said, and I wanted to try to jot it down to kind of keep a few stances of what I thought was interesting. But even with let's say student loan debt, right? And even the idea of, and I would agree with this, like a main reason that a lot of people, and I can't say that I know because I don't know this because I don't have any student loan debt, but for a lot of my friends that have gone to college, they're trying to be responsible. They don't really filter a lot of money in the economy because everything has to be bare bones and save, right? Like we're the generation that went through a recession. So by the time that we were really getting started in our careers, a recession was already afoot. And so the thing is, you want to pay your car loan, right? Pay your house if you have one. So, I mean, a lot of us millennials don't apparently have homes. And you need to pay all these other things first before you do any and everything else. And so that's definitely being responsible, yes, but for a country that really runs off of debt, it makes it very hard for them to be a major contributor. And it's already been shown that debts are now starting to come home to roost, as they say, right? It's happening to where people aren't paying their bills. This is just like the first signal that something may be wrong with the economy, and it's happening. And look, I'm not saying that some people aren't being irresponsible, right? And you got like these jackasses buying BMWs or whatever cars that they can't afford. Like, please don't do that. But at the same time, let's not pretend either that there's all this disposable income that a lot of people have. They don't. And bankruptcy, one of the first things, which this will tie into some of the topics of this equation, but the number one reason for bankruptcy is, of course, medical debt. You can't claim student loan debt. So even if you were to do bankruptcy, you still can't get out of it. So it's definitely an entrapment. I mean, when you're owing, over six figures for student loan debt, like what's really going on? And I mean, and again, back to Marianne and some others that will call that out, like we have to really start talking about some of the root causes of the issues. And not just saying, like, people say, oh, medical situation, like, that's controllable. And it's like, well, no, not necessarily. Like, you got to there's so many factors. You got to go to the cause of it, from the fact that most Americans don't have an emergency fund. Well, I think it's like $450. Like, right now, if you're listening to this and you just got hit with a random, I don't know, your tire blew out in your car, and of course, why a tire would cost $400 in the average cars, beyond me, that's not the case. But let's say, installation, whatever, it's going to cost $450. Chances are you don't have it. So it's going to have to go on credit, again, if you have that. And this is where the cycle happens. And so we really do run off of debt. So we're telling people, on one hand, be responsible, be debt free, but that's not necessarily the way that we work as a nation. So I know that's a whole other rabbit hole we can go down, but I just thought it was interesting that she kind of pulled out a few surprises. I was like, that inspires some deep thought to be discussed.
Yeah, she single-handedly gave me a definition of reparations that I don't think I've ever heard before, which made me really consider it differently. Mm-hmm. I don't know where I stand necessarily on reparations, just because I'm not sure that there's enough research that's gone into it. I don't think that there's enough background that's been delved into inside of Congress to say that this is something we could physically do in the interest of our relationships with the African American community, and also with responsibility fiscally to the government. So I'm not 100% sure where I stand on that, but I have had personal opinions, and they were definitely challenged tonight in a way that they've never been before. And so I'm definitely thinking now a little bit differently because of some of the things that she brought up. Marianne Williamson is one of those candidates that represents everything that Donald Trump represented in 2016. And I remember watching Marianne Williamson.
Before you go too far, hold on. Do you recall the amount of money that they said during that debate?
How much for reparations?
Yeah. She
said, and it was in the billions, wasn't it? 500?
No, I don't think it was that. I don't think it was that much.
Five. It was in the B's.
Oh, it definitely was. It definitely was. And I'd be curious to look it up. I don't know. Why we're here. This is why we can do these sort of things. This is what the magical internet is for. Let's see. And the reason why, I want to take the time to get this done right is because, of course,
Nelson Walker weighed in. He said 500 billion.
500 billion? Yeah, and that's a lot of dough.
And that's one of those things that I think about it, and I think my personal opinion on reparations, again, not a well thought personal opinion, just because I don't know much about it. I don't have a whole lot of context to go with it. But my personal thought on reparations is there a fiscal response? Is there a way to do it that's fiscally responsible so that the same people we're giving those money to are not going to be part of an equation where we now have even more debt that they're also going to have to focus on paying off? Like, is it something that incurring that 500 billion? Yes, it does go back to paying a debt that's owed. But is it at the expense of the same people? Because they're not leaving the country. They're still here, despite what President Trump might want. They're still going to be here after the fact, after it's all said and done. And so are they going to be just as fiscally responsible for paying off that debt? At which point, is it really a debt that they're paying? Or is it just it's just a weird dynamic that I'm not sure if I understand exactly how that would work and how that would shake out for that community. But it definitely, like I said, she challenged my viewpoint a little bit on that. What I was saying earlier, she represents everything that Donald Trump represented. And I remember 2015 looking at the election going, there's a guy on the debate stage that doesn't belong. He sounds like a moron. He doesn't know what he's talking about. There's no chance he could ever beat an actual politician in a discussion about the issues. Well, he's the president now. And I remember in Miami, when they had the first round of Democratic debates, I said almost the exact same thing about Marianne Williamson because I heard some of the things she was saying. I was like, she's an idiot. She doesn't belong on the stage. She doesn't know what she's talking about. I think that there could be a level of similarities here, and I thought it was going to be Yang. I thought that was going to be the one that sort of represented the same thing that Donald Trump represented. But Yang, I think, is a little bit more organized, to your point. And some of the things that he talks about, even if they are sort of unfounded or unsupported by a whole lot of political reasoning. But I think there is a level of similarity, and for that reason, I would caution Democrats to be very careful about getting too excited or crazy about the idea that somebody with new ideas that's not a politician is the best option. Because regardless of what is being said, those new ideas are ideas that come from uneducation in politics. They come from the fact that they don't have that personal experience of making something better. And I would challenge that right now in 2020, the last thing we need to do, regardless of how great some of these ideas are, is put another person in the White House that doesn't belong in the White House for whatever reason. There's got to be somebody on that stage who's more qualified, who's going to fight for similar issues, that doesn't have to be the revolution of abandoning politics altogether, which is Donald Trump and then somebody like Kevin Yang or Marianne Williamson, somebody who's never been in that arena before. I appreciate the attractiveness of that, but I also, if 2016 taught us anything, we have to be very careful about the fact that this is a actual thing. World leaders interact with this person. We're the face of national and world security. We're the premier of governments that needs to be taken seriously, and we have lost so much credibility over the last 3 years. It's very important we get that back in any way possible.
Yeah, and I'm very curious. Like, I don't understand why. Like, for many of us, like, I hear some again, our fellow Americans, like, just blowing it off like it means nothing. I'm like, does your reputation not mean something to you, right? Like, to me, I think our reputation is a country that means everything to me, right? Like, my reputation as an individual means so much at work. It means so much in my personal space and everywhere else. And so, like, there's this one lady, she didn't respond back, but, like, on Twitter, it's like her thing was like red, white, and FU situation. I'm like, why would you come out that way, right? Like, you come off so condescending, and it's like, it's us first and last, nobody else in between, right? And I just find it very interesting, like, where do we get off where that's cool and that's the way we should behave? And as a model of how the free world should behave, I just don't see the connection there where we can justify the route that we've been taking for so long. Like, I mean, to me, this is just, it's outrageous, right? Like, we'll go here for a second, but we'll bring it back. But, like, look at the things that were being said about Baltimore, right? Like, I'm like, look, I get it. Like, I've been to New York City, Baltimore. I had a great time in New York. I had a great time in Baltimore. I have a good time in Chicago, a.k.a. Chirac. But you know what? Like, I don't take a poo emoji on it. I just don't, like, crap on those places, right? Like, look, I like them. And there's dangerous places, unfortunately, everywhere you go here. But to do this divide, right? Like, and to use the words, like, I thought it was very interesting that you can go through and see where we use the word, or he used the word, infestation everywhere. And Jonathan Wood, I'm with you on that. Like, half America behaves like that. It's crazy to me. Like, no, like, these are still your neighbors. This is still like your country, your city, right? Like, I live in the city of Atlanta, and guess what? Thankfully he didn't say it's an infested place, but you go to certain parts of Atlanta and it's a little rough, right? And so you got neighborhoods like that have been in despair for whatever reason. There's economic downturns, all sorts of things, and all sorts of reasons for it. But you don't like disrespect them. And I think there's a way to tactfully say, like, hey, look, these places are really, in a sense, like a below a type of standard that we should have, but you should be positive and be inspirational on how you want to uplift them, not just kind of take a crap on them, right? And so I'm just noticing the language that he uses, and I just think, again, just as a citizen here, like, no, that's not okay. That's not cool. Like, back up for a second. You go to one of those places, see what they do to you, right? Like, just not cool. You don't say that about your own. That's crazy. Like, we all might have that crazy family member, right? But you still love them. You don't talk down to them. And I just look at it as, again, the leader of the free world, the president of the United States, like, literally takes shots at his own country. And I don't understand how people find that to be patriotic. Like, I don't. Like, I look at him, I just think he's disgraceful.
Yeah, that whole thing with Baltimore, man. That's a really strange time to be alive when you hear the president of the United States use such racist, and I'll call it what it is. It's racist, a divisive, offensive, derogatory, inflammatory language about a city in the United States. Now, I find it very strange that wasn't he just telling congressman from Somalia or congresswoman from Somalia to go back to where she came from because the city wasn't very good and because she didn't like the way country was being run or something. So if you don't like it, leave. And then he turns around and he says something to the effect of Baltimore is infested with. And to me, it's almost like if the CEO, if Tim Cook came on and was like, Apple's the greatest company in all of the world. There's no company that's better than Apple. But let me tell you about something. These people that make the Apple Watch, they suck really badly. And I'm not really sure what they're doing around here. But don't let that take away from that. Apple's still the greatest brand. But man, that Apple Watch manufacturing team, they really aren't very good. It's like, how can you say those two things and also not be a reflection on you as a leader? That's your district, Mr. President. I hate to break this to you, but Baltimore is a city of people that voted you as president. Maybe not in the majority, but there are people there who voted in an election which you won, which makes it your responsibility to take care of them. And by talking about them in that way, by pointing the finger at Elijah Cummings and saying it's his fault, by making the connection that Elijah Cummings and the money that he's been spending in Baltimore is the issue, and not the fact that Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, had something like $100 million in properties that were just literally infested with rats and people living in those properties, ruining the city of Baltimore. Nothing about that, but more about the fact that politicians haven't done their job. I refuse to give the president enough credit to say that it's 100% driving the conversation away from the things that, sort of shock. I think he watched a story on Fox News that mentioned the word Baltimore and infestation, and he just went straight to Twitter to just parrot the whole thing. And it happened this way. He doubled down because that's what he always does. But when you hear those kinds of things and when you see those things happen, and then you see this 10 people on the stage that are far more qualified to do the job in a way that's more positively indicative of what represents America, you can't help but get a little bit excited at the idea that this is actually going to come down to a point where maybe one of these 10 people are the new president of the United States, and we get to see some of that respect restored, as we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, like, that matters a lot. And it's like, look, I like the idea, or, I shouldn't say the idea, but like the fact that, look, there's some things that, our current president got right? Like, let's say challenging China, for example, or even like border security. Like, everybody agrees on those things, right? Like, I would be hard pressed to find someone that wouldn't say border security matters, or that, we don't feel like the Chinese are taking advantage of, the situation and trade deals. Everybody agrees with that. It's how you handle it. And, at some point, I don't care who you are, who you support, which side you're on, there's a limitation there, and I think it's really important that people say, like, okay, like, enough already, like, this has gone too far. I originally voted for you because I thought you were going to do X, Y, and Z that you stated, and now you've gone off the rails, right? And people have to hold them accountable. But when we can literally go to the point to where, his statement on he can go on Fifth Avenue, shoot somebody and not lose supporters, like, that's a dangerous thing, or how patriotic are we going to be if, let's say, he doesn't want to, let's say he gets a second term, people jokingly put out there, oh, he could serve a third term, and he does say interesting things of that nature. Then, at what point do we say, well, wait a minute, like, no, like, you've gone too far? And there doesn't seem to be a point, right, that we can all collectively say that he's gone too far, right? Like, with the whole Baltimore situation, people say, oh, well, yeah, but it's true. And I'm like, you know what? I want you to go to work. And when your boss that has, whether it's a bad attitude, something of that nature, and just let off on them, everything that's true, and see where it gets you. Like, at some point, you're going to have an intersection of your truthfulness without tact is going to lead you into some sort of conflict. And as somebody who has access to nuclear buttons and everything else, like, you best be the mastermind at controlling your mouth, your thoughts, and your actions to avoid certain conflicts. And it seems like he only escalates those from what he did with North Korea, which, by the way, they're not backing down on the nuclear situation. Clearly, Iran isn't either, because we have completely backed out of the Iran deal, of the nuclear deal there. As a matter of fact, where he mentioned how he's kind of cool with the arms race with Asia. It's like, wait a minute, like, where are you going with this? Like, sure, we want to secure and we want to make sure that we have people know, like, don't mess with the big dogs, because you will get hurt situation, but you don't want to openly invite or threaten and dare people to challenge you. Like, that's where you get in big trouble, especially when people have nothing to lose, or you get in a situation with a country that says, you know what, as a matter of fact, I am going to go for this person because this is going to put us on the map, like North Korea, right? Which I know that's a whole other situation. And yes, Jonathan Wood, by the way, definitely every week something different is happening. But I will say this. One thing we have to be very careful of is, the guy says he doesn't need any sort of, I don't need publicity, I don't need media. But remember, that's what he does best. And look, at anybody, right? Like, you want to have distraction. Right? If I worked for a company and, let's say, something really bad happened, sometimes you want to put out a different press release or a different distraction to kind of take the eyes off of that, right? Or you announce something or something bad, like what at Facebook, when they had a whole bunch of data or whatnot that leaked out. They put it during one of, like, Trump's triads, right? Which was smart for Facebook to do, because it's like, okay, like, put it out now where the cycle isn't going to quite pick up on it. And so it's just like a magician, right? Like, I know I'm going to pull a trick in front of you. And the best way to get you not to see what's happening from an underhand movement is to divert your eyes. And look, he's a master at it. The dude, he's the best politician. Like, we thought we were getting somebody that was, like, out of that tight circle, right? Because, again, I can see where people thought he was going to be refreshing for sure. But at the same time, you let one of the masters in. There's somebody who does it best, and it's very clear.
Yeah, I'm not willing to give him that much credit. I disagree. I think it's more of a commentary on how gullible some people in America really are, and more about the fact that he gets lucky by how he directs the media, just because the media covers literally everything he does. He doesn't change the conversation. He just adds to it, and the media uses it because that's what gets people clicks.
So wait, you think that's lucky though? You think this long street is lucky?
I don't think he was looking at the coverage of the Mueller probe and saying, I need something different, so I'm going to go and attack the city of Baltimore. I don't think that's a comprehensive thought that could cross through his head. I don't give him enough credit for that. I honestly believe he was dealing with the Mueller probe. He was going through that. He was watching Fox News to see the coverage he likes. And while they weren't talking about the Mueller probe, because they don't talk about it on Fox News, they were talking about how bad the city of Baltimore was. They ran a 3-minute news package, and from there, Trump was like, oh, this is something I can, number one, I can attack Democrats. I can lend something to the fact that there are cities that are run by Democrats. Some of his talking points, which he has consistently gone with, that Democratic-run cities are what he would call a shithole. And because of that, he puts out a Twitter tirade that let's see what happens. And you know what? Sure, the media took it, ran with it, but before the media ran with it, Elijah Cummings ran with it, and several members of Congress ran with it and said this is not acceptable comments. This is not acceptable behavior. But again, I don't know that it's so much that he's deliberately directing these motivated attacks. I think he's just doing what he would normally do if he was president or not, and the fact that he is president gets the news cycle. Everything he does gets the news cycle. And at some point, something will have to advance it. So if you want to say that he just does what he does and that's just naturally how it happens, I would buy that. But I don't think that he is that much of a stable genius to be directing the media coverage, because I don't think he would have the patience to do that. I don't see him being able to sit there and have the attention span to say this is the correct strategy to direct the news conversation.
No, you don't need it. You don't need it. Look, I'm not saying that he's in the situation of let me mastermind and plan it out, but he's very good at diverting attention. Like that, I think there's a reason why he's in a cycle like that, and he likes to be on it. But anyway, we'll have to.
It's definitely possible. I can't.
I would say this: go look at his tweets when things go down, and notice how sometimes it's on like for instance when the whole Mueller thing was coming, he wasn't necessarily talking exactly what Mueller was talking about. He was going into exoneration and everything else, and then focusing on the Russian probe, right? Like he's not on the same topic. And look, rightfully so. I see why he was doing it, because it's very interesting to me why he was playing with that. But to Chris's point, racist. So hold on. So look, Chris mentioned over here, being a racist means you don't want to be associated with anybody of that race. I don't think that's not necessarily true.
Absolutely
right?
not.
I don't think that's true. I think
racism.
No, racism, just by its very definition, is this. I would believe that my particular group, right, my ethnicity is superior to yours. Doesn't mean that we don't necessarily be associated. Like, if you look at times, for instance, there were a lot of people that, let's say, like, Thomas Jefferson, right? He had mixed kids with the slaves, right? Like people dipped into chocolate all the time, at that particular point. And we can't say that they weren't necessarily not racist, right? You can still be and treat people nicely, but still be racist, right? Like I've had somebody ask me straight up, like, okay, your wife, like, how did you two get together like this old dude? I don't understand what she would see in you and why she would get with you. Look, he wasn't rude. The comment itself in a sense was, but what I'm saying is he came off very nice. And people say it all the time. One of my favorites is, oh, I have black friends, right? It's like, well, first off, would they call you friends? I don't know about that. But no, I don't think you have to be mean or berating or not wanting to be associated to not necessarily be racist. Because by its own definition, you can still think you're superior, still put them in a particular place. Like, let me give you a prime example when it happened to me. So when I had, I owned a T-Mobile shop with this dude Saj, right? And so Saj one time asked me to go pick up these particular cases. I'm like, okay, cool. So I stopped by this Korean mart. When I go there to pick it up, they told me they didn't have any. And then I tell Saj, like, come back to the store. I'm like, yeah, man, they didn't have any. We're going to have to find another source. And he's like, what do you mean they didn't have any? Like, I sourced it. They said they had it. And he's like, let me call back. So he calls back. And he's like, Terrence, they have them. Like, go there and get it. And I'm like, okay. So I show up again. Guess what? Didn't have it, right? And I'm like, okay. So I call Saj this time. I'm like, Saj, like, look, I'm here. They said they didn't have it. So he's like, okay, hang tight, because it wasn't too far from our location, this outlet. So, he shows up. Sure enough, he walks in, and guess what? They magically have them. And so the interesting part of this was, look, they weren't going to give it to me for whatever reason, right? Which to me, like, it's no secret. Like, I know in parts of those communities, like, black people aren't seen as intelligent people. We're not seen as people of any sort of value or stature. Like, for those of you who may know some of the Asian culture, and look, I'm not trying to call anybody out directly, but look, it has happened before. And they weren't mean to me. They didn't spit in my face. They didn't try to kick me out of the place or whatnot. But to pretend for 1 second that they didn't believe that that I was beneath them would be completely naive of me. And it certainly happens. And look, you can enforce racism with a smile on your face. And a lot of people do that day in and day out. This is why America all of a sudden we act like, for a moment, oh, everything was cool, right? America's not racist, and all of a sudden these things come out. No. These things have been dormanted for quite some time in a lot of people. So no, I can't agree with that.
Yeah, and I mean the word you use, superiority, I think is the most important word when you consider what racism is. It's not at all about treating somebody badly. It's not about being disrespectful. It's not about being nice. It's about having a conscious opinion that the person that you're interacting with, the person that you see, or the person that's in front of you is less than you because they're not the same color skin, they're not from the same country, they're different walk of life, they're different
Mm-hmm.
ethnicity. That's what racism is. And I think that it's hard for some people to admit that racism is what it is because they have some of those same feelings. There was a study, or rather, a post that I saw a speaker, and was talking about the fact that the reason some people struggle to define racism and to understand what racism is because they would consider themselves to be racist by that own definition. And in fact, it's not racism. It's a misunderstanding of what they view as inferiority complex between humans. It's a misunderstanding or misinterpretation of what they would define as empathy or a lack of empathy. So, as an example that they gave, if I'm walking on one side of the road and I see on the same side of the road a black person wearing very low hanging shorts with the chain, the beanie, the grill, the whole thing, that if they were to cross the street because of the fact that this person was the way that they were, that would be considered a racist tendency, and that's racism. And the reason they don't want to admit that is because they see that and they say, well, I would do that. But the fact of the matter is, the reason they do that was not because of the color of the skin. It wasn't because of anything. It was because of the security aspect. It was because if this was a person who was white wearing the same clothes in the same setting, that they would probably feel uneasy in the same way. It's a strange commentary because our brains don't work that way. We can't define it as what puts us in a comfort zone. And people so often confuse that with racism to say, like, I'm uncomfortable around this person, I don't trust this person because they're black. No, you just don't trust them because you don't know them. The fact that they're black is happenstance. If you're not racist, you're not racist, and you shouldn't feel bad about feeling some certain ways. However, if you're going out of your way to view somebody who's a different skin color, who's a different ethnicity, who's from a different country, as inferior, if you're making statements like that black community or this city of Baltimore infested
Or how about this?
people,
If you
or
don't
Mexicans
like
are
this country, go
rapists,
back to where you came from to four colored individuals. I'm sorry, Chris. Like that shit is racist, dude. Like
that is
I'm sorry,
the
that is so racist.
definition.
Muslim bans, right? Like you notice all the beef and all the issues he has with, right? Like dude's racist, right? And if you feel it's idiotic, that's fine. That's your opinion on it. But no, like I think the dude is just straight up racist. Like just could not care less.
It's not that you could show me 100 examples of him being nice to black people. You can show me 100 examples of him going and shaking hands with Martin Luther King Jr. or something. Like, that's not what defines racism. Racism is what's defined by your motivations, by your understanding of racial superiority, and everything that he has done as president, everything that he has said. He has never shied away from the fact that he will share his opinions, no matter how pro or con they would be to the public perception.
Mm-hmm.
And he has always shared opinions that have come across as very racist. And there's no reason why somebody should look at the words that he says and the fact that he is so open about how he feels and he's so honest about how he feels and say this person is somehow not a racist. I just can't see it. And furthermore, I'll take it a further step. If you are justifying the things that he has said as not racist, that means some part of you is defending what he is saying. I'm not saying that somebody who defends Donald Trump in any way, shape, or form is racist, but if you are looking the other way as he's saying these things, and you're saying this is not a racist comment, this is not racism, you are wrong. This is the definition of racism. This is a picture-perfect example of what racism is in the dictionary, and if you are choosing to disagree with that, you are endorsing racism. And that is not okay.
Well, I think people, look, Trump just has to own who he is, right? And I'm sorry, I've never seen any other individual, especially so publicly in this higher office, that has behaved this way. And look, there's people that are undercover. Look, I've seen it. Look, I have family members that I love that have specifically said things like, I don't believe white and black people should mix. but these are people I've had dinner with. I still have dinner with, right? I still love them or whatnot, but they can't pretend that that particular feeling isn't racist, right? Like,
let me go into that, because that's exactly what this study, this speaker was talking about. It's possible that that comes from a very racist opinion, a very racist motivation, but it's also possible that that comes from a history of uncomfortableness between relationships where they have known black and white people to intermingle in a relationship and it's never worked out well, so they have associated that with the fact that they just don't feel it should be a thing. But it's no racism attached to it whatsoever. I'm not saying that is or isn't the case, but the fact is we look at everything, and forget the cliche, we look at everything so black and white, but that's not what racism is. And that's why when people scream racism the other way, when Black Lives Matter and these organizations where they're trying so hard to fight against white supremacy and sort of say stand up against racial injustices, that's why when they say, oh well, black people are racist against white people, in what way does it show that a black person is viewing themselves as superior to white people, versus does it show that black people are standing up to say that we are not inferior to white people? That is a very different dichotomy. That's a very different conversation.
And I will give you that. Like the terms are used way too loosely, right? Like I've heard so many people called racist that are not, right? Like I'm like,
right.
Like really? Like how can you even say that, right? It's really interesting to me to where somebody could whether it's a lighthearted joke or whatnot, someone's like, oh, that's racist or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, what that person said was, you can maybe find it to be, like an ill-told joke, but it was definitely not racist, right? But we as a society, like, we are way too quick to be throwing out the racist terms. Like, I agree with that 100%. Like, people just go completely crazy with it. But you have to look at behaviors, right? Like, that to me is the main real key indicator, right? You have to be very slow, because, like, if you would have asked me, like, when Trump first came to presidency, I would have said no, right? And even maybe a year into it, I probably would have said no. My first raised the eyebrow was like the Muslim ban, right? And I was like, okay, Muslim ban. Okay, well, interesting. Let's see what countries he banned. And when I look at the countries that, like, he's banned, right, I'm like, wait a minute, but why did you not ban where there's a lot of dangerous activity coming from, like Saudi Arabia, right? And then I start to kind of follow the money. I'm like, okay, well, you have business ties there. Very interesting, right? So, I'm kind of tying those things together and I'm looking at it, but I'm like, okay, like, this is where it's gone, like, too far. And by the way, like, for, I'm with Jonathan Wood on here, right? Like, you can't have it both ways. The anti-Semitism we hear from specific Democrat representatives is deplorable, and just as apologizing for it doesn't make it go away. And absolutely, right? And, like, a lot of people, we understand, like, think about where the Democratic parties come from, right? Because that used to be, like, the racist party, like the party you didn't want to be involved with. And things certainly flip. And this is why, like, I think an allegiance to a party is crazy, right? Like, the allegiance still has to be to the country as a whole, and you can't forget it. And you got to be very careful, even though, like, clearly for me now, like, I'm registered Democrat, like, for the foreseeable future, I am not going to be on the Republican bandwagon, because the one thing, like, to get back to the debates tonight, the one thing I liked about the Democratic debates is they would still argue one another on ideas, right? And agree and disagree. Like, that is healthy. What I'm seeing right now is a whole bunch of agreeing, and then secretly behind the doors, allegedly, there's disagreement. But, oh yeah, in the face of things, no, we're just going to agree with it. And for people who think, like, countries should be ran like a business, this is another reason why I find issue with that, right? Like, if the CEO of whatever company says that I got to do something, I can maybe try to state my disagreement, but guess what? You don't do it publicly, because that'll get you fired. So you kind of have to do it maybe one-on-one. Again, that's a maybe. Maybe you don't want to upset him or her as the CEO, but you have to go along with it. And I don't believe countries, especially democracies, should behave that way. It should be, no, we're held to a high standard. Ultimately, we do want the president to succeed, no matter who it is. Like, I could say, like, look, I want Trump to succeed in certain things, right? Not in everything, because some things to me seem, batshit crazy. But for the most part, like, you want him to be successful because he's a representation. And for people to get it twisted, that the moment you question it, the moment that you call him out on something, that you're not patriotic, like, that's what's crazy to me. And while you may not think he's well crafted, and I can agree with that, there's certain smart things he'll do. Like, he'll cling to the farmers, right? And the farmers have an issue with his trade deal big time because it hurts them. But he also puts it in an interesting way to where if for some reason, if the farmers seem to go against them, then they're not being patriotic, right? And that's a very interesting thing that we throw at one another.
Yeah, no, I'll give you credit for that for sure. He has a great team of strategists behind him, and he does implement that strategy in a way that's very effective. But I'll stick to the debate rules here. My name was just invoked in the Facebook comments, so I need to clarify one thing.
Mm-hmm.
I am not calling anybody a racist. Certainly not somebody I've never met before. I don't care if you support Donald Trump. I don't care if you are a fan of his policies, or if you are okay with the racist language that he uses. That does not make you a racist. That's the point that I'm making. What makes you a racist is when you start to use that as a form of superiority to yourself, your race, over another race. I don't know Chris, so I can't say for sure if that's how he views things or if he's motivated by those things. I would never make that assertion without having prior knowledge to that. However, my point was that the racist conversation, the racism conversation, the comments, and specifically the comment that was referenced here, is telling people back to where they go, back where they are from, if they hate America so much. That conversation is not based on anything but feeling like there's a superiority involved, right? That's you saying, if you're not from this country because you're a different race, because you're from a different ethnicity, your background is different than mine, you're not from this country. If you don't like it so much, go back there. Well, he didn't just tell that to a woman from Somalia. He told that to a woman from Illinois. He told that to a woman from New York. He told that to a woman from areas inside of the United States.
And those words matter.
If that is not racism, because those women were all not white. If that is not racism,
yeah, because if you're white, where are you going to go back from? Like, would he say that, right? Like, no,
right?
Exactly, and that's the assumption, right? It's just because you're a person of color that this is not your home. Somewhere else technically is your home, right? And very good call.
If I can just use one more point here. If Chris was at your house, where he says we should have a conversation, I'm not sure how safe that conversation would be for me, but if he was at your house...
He's a good dude. I know him. He's a good dude.
And he was there talking to you, and you didn't agree with him, and you were saying these things about America that we talk about on a regular basis on this show, would he then tell you to go back to Africa?
Of course
he wouldn't say that to you, then he should never support that the president says it to anybody else.
No, and here, this is another argument I make it for we need to move on, because I like Jonathan's idea about the new Green Deal. But what Jonathan, too funny. What I really think about what's interesting about it is I think that's so un-American actually of the president to say, and I want you guys to think about it for a second. When you say, and we use the word hate, which is just asinine anyway, because it's not hate that these people feel, it's a certain disapproval, right, or distrust, or they take issue with. Remember, America was founded just on those issues. If you can't state your dismay or your issues or anything with a country, and you should just shut up and take it or go back, that is so mind-blowingly un-American. Like, you need to think about what you say. That, to me, is just unacceptable. No, it doesn't matter which side you're on, red or blue or whatever, somewhere in between. No, America is founded on that's exactly what we do. We stick up for our rights. We have freedom of speech for a reason. And the freedom of speech wasn't so I can go on the internet or say anything. It's so that I could say something, let's say, that it was against the king or queen and not get arrested for it, for these very reasons. So, in other words, for you to say that would be well, then you don't even believe in the ideals that found America to begin with, right? So I find that unacceptable. That's why when you see AOC, love her or hate her, when people stand up at her, her events and people get mad, like I remember there was one particular one, they were trying to boot this guy out because he just kept hogging up the time and kept disrupting. But she's like, no, like everybody needs to stay calm. Like he has a right to be here. Let him speak. And she's absolutely right. I think there's a borderline of where you can get too disruptive and too unruly and, in a public space, right? There are limitations to that. But the idea is that people should be able to challenge it, and that is accepted and is okay here. And to say things like Donald Trump has said is so un-American. Flat out, full stop. I will throw the amendments at you all day long if need be. No, you need to hear these people out. And that's their prerogative. You don't have to necessarily. I could just go down this whole rabbit hole. But anyways, I'm gonna let you finish up on that before we move on.
Yeah, the last point I I think with that conversation specifically, it's a really good implementation of the golden rule. If you are a Trump supporter and you would not say personally what he has said to Ilhan Omar, AOC, any of the other congresswomen, or now Elijah Cummings, if you would not say the things that he has said to those members of Congress, to your African American friends, your Muslim friends, if you have friends that are a different races from you, if you would not make those same assertions to those people, then you should ask yourself why you support the president who does. And you should ask yourself why you are not condemning those comments, and understanding the fact that you can still disagree with something that somebody you like says. I don't agree with everything that a candidate that I would vote for says on stage. I don't necessarily endorse everything. Part of the reason that Donald Trump came to power was because that's the perception, is that he can do no wrong. That is a dangerous perception. If you are not ready to stand up for what you would not stand for personally, then how much is your vote worth? How much is your politics worth? How much is your opinion of the candidate worth? That's the question that I would ask. Not calling anybody racist, not making any assertion about anybody's racist tendencies or racist opinions. If you're a racist out there, I certainly don't know it based on who you're voting for. I don't want to know it based on who you're voting for. It's based on what's in your heart. But if you are not a racist and you're out there making those assertions, you need to ask yourself why you're okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the bottom line. I mean, people can say what they will, but I'm like, look, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. So anyways, about the green New Deal, right? Like, and he's not the most eloquent speaker at all, not even close, Jonathan. I would take some middle school kid, he or she that's practicing debate could likely more so hold their own and use language for adults. But nonetheless, I'm going to digress before I just crap all over him. But anyway, so back to like the Green New Deal and whatnot. So that came up briefly for a moment, and I thought it was very interesting as well, because people like battling like the jobs thing, right? And then one tried to throw, I think it was Senator Warren under the bus and say that, with the job situation, right, that they're like demonizing coal miners and everything else, right? And I thought that was very interesting, because it's like that's definitely like not the case. But I understand, I have empathy of where this fear comes from, that if I worked for whatever reason a coal mine and that was my livelihood, my dad did it, I did it, I can see where people are reluctant to really move on. And by the way, I just off topic real quick, Rudy, don't you dare 4G63 over 4B11. I like them both, but yeah, I'm always going to be 4G63 for life. But that's a whole other situation. So, okay, that was my off track for a moment. But, yeah, the jobs thing, like, to your point, Jonathan, yeah, they barely touched it. But I think that's really important, because, like, right now the economy's still going well. There's some signs showing, right? Some cracks for sure in the armor. And, some things you could point at Trump, some things, are just going to happen just due to time. But it's very interesting that people are so reluctant to really move on, right? And I think that's where it's interesting, just as human beings, like how we're not so adaptive to change. And so the oil industry, certainly at some point, like it has to go. Like it's limited life, like that is very clear, right? And if you follow physics, science, if you pay attention to climate, so on and so forth, like clearly it's not in a very efficient way to source energy. And yet it's proven that so many more jobs could come of it, but we're so hesitant to move on through. So why do you think that some of the candidates really didn't talk about that? Do you think it was just because there wasn't necessarily time for it, or why do you think they did not go there?
To be completely honest, it's just because it's not really a flattering conversation for Democrats to give the president credit for anything on the national stage, and they would have to. They would have to give him credit for the fact that the job numbers are still consistently on par with what Obama did, and regardless of whether or not you could make the claim that it would be fine with or without Donald Trump's influence, it's not responsible to make that assertion without looking at the actual data, and the data says that it's because of Donald Trump's presidency. So. Honestly, I think that's just more of a political posturing decision to not have that conversation too much. And what can you change about something that's going really well? One candidate did bring it up, and it was very short-lived, about the quality of jobs. I want to say it was Buttigieg. The quality of jobs that are being had. So yes, the numbers show that jobs are increasing, or staying steady. Excuse me, but the quality of those jobs is not up to par with where it should
for sure. I think we could all. If you try to get in the job market recently, I think you could attest to that.
Yeah, but it's such a specific argument. It's such a strange hill to die on to debates into the presidential primary. So it's probably that's why they didn't go too far into it. Also, the points that they had to talk about, they had the time requirements. Healthcare was a huge point that they had to spend a lot of time on. Immigration, gun reform probably didn't have as much on the docket as it did, but after the tragic events of this weekend, gun legislation was probably something that was added into the conversation more than it would have been because of what happened in California and in Brooklyn this weekend. Um, there's a lot of topics that have to gain some discussion just to get people, like we started talking about it early in this conversation, interested in the discussion. And healthcare is one of those really interesting conversations because we have been at odds with healthcare internally in this country for so long and still have not really made a conscious decision to fight it. Even with Obamacare and even with the Affordable Care Act, it was challenging, some parts of the insurance agency, but also not, because they still were able to go in and profit $100 billion or something last year on premiums.
That was it. Yeah, it's such an interesting point that Bernie Sanders brought up, right? Because I mean, like, he seems to be kind of the king of that conversation when it comes to healthcare. And like, look, like, we got to get it together. I'm not saying like with 100% certainty that this is the path that we have to go, but it's very clear like we have to make a move, right? But we can't have paralysis by analysis because this clearly is not working. Now, for me, thankfully, and maybe for you, right? Like, I have great health insurance. It's been wonderful to me. I can't complain at all. Obviously the company takes a big chunk of that. But if I think about like how much of it I get to dodge versus how many people don't get to dodge when they have to go to it. And like, I don't have to think twice. Like, when I went to the hospital earlier this year, it was like no big deal. Like, if I'm going to go, I'm just going to go, right? Like, I'm not going to think twice about it. Better to be safe than sorry. But, I had a brother that certainly he passed away because he didn't go to the doctor. And I can't put this all on that, but what I'm saying is, it would have been nice if he had the opportunity to go without weighing the fact that, he's in school and he's, serving as a waiter at a restaurant, right, while he does school. Like, when you think about things like that, like, oh, if I seem like I have the cold or flu, I should just sleep it off. I just had recently an uncle pass away. I'm about to go to his funeral on, Saturday. He's only 2 years older than me. He may as well be more like a big brother than an uncle. Similar situation. He called his wife and he's like, yeah, I think I may need to go to the doctor. And when you pause for a second, let's be honest. We all know the real reason why we hesitate, right? And it's not because I have some sort of, oh, well, I'm a man, I don't need to go situation. No, it's well, do I really need to go? Because is it worth me going away from work? Is it worth the medical bill and the hassles? Like, come on, guys, it's a hassle to go to the hospital. Like, it's just not a nice procedure. Like, when I went to the emergency room, I'm like, don't give me no stupid ass paperwork. Like, I'm in pain. Like, send me through, deal with it later. But from the hospital's perspective, like, they got to go through that process. And so it's interesting to me because it does have influence. I've seen people personally that I know that said, yeah, no, just hanging in the car for a little bit because we're going to wait and see if this fever goes down. Because if the fever goes down, great. Like, we just took Knox. Again, we just took him to the doctor because he had a high fever when he woke up from the bed. And my wife's like, okay, like, should we take on whatnot? We kind of hesitate for a second and we're like, no, we're just going to go. Right. And because we know, again, prime factor, and these words came out of my mouth was, look, we have good insurance. It's crazy just not to use it. But there's a lot of people, and I have empathy here, that are not in that situation where they are going to try to push their luck. Because, look, number one, bankruptcy. Period. The number one. And Rudy, I bet you like doctors if you knew your life was in their hands. Like, go or die, you'll love the doctor. And you don't always know that, so it's easy to say it offhand. But the point is, like, I see so many times people hesitate. And again, the number one reason for bankruptcy, the number one reason, go look it up, is for medical bills. And,
yeah. No, I can attest to that personally. I've got a couple of different things I want to add. Number one, I'm really sorry to hear about your uncle. I know you mentioned that, but that's still a tragedy. And to hear that we have people in this country who are passing away because of decisions that they're making for their healthcare. It's something that's very difficult for me to grasp because where I come from, the country that I come from, and a lot of the examples that I have with medical coverage is when I went to Canada for the summers. Of course, that's where I would get all my work done. Of course, that was where I'd go to the doctor and get all my checkups and things because it was free to me as a Canadian citizen. it's the issue stems from so many different places. If you're looking at, I'll give you an example. My last job, number one, I was working for a credit union, and number one, I got to see as a loan officer, sales trainer for the credit union. I got to see firsthand a lot of different people on their credit reports, why their credit was so low and why their bankruptcy options had come up, and why these certain things were in play. And you're correct; it was a large number percentage-wise. Our average membership age at the credit union I was at was 50s, in the 50s, and so it was older folks. But the number one reason was medical bills, and it was crazy how high you would see these in the 30s, the 50s, the $70,000 ranges of credits that are on this person's social security number. And when I was also at the credit union, we were on the softball team, and I was playing a game of softball, and I was running from I just hit a line drive into the outfield, and coming from home plate to first base. I don't know how she got it, but she rocked it over to first base, and the guy at first was like, "Nope, I'm out." He moved his glove, and it hit me right in the side of the head and knocked me out. I had a concussion. I was really messed up. I was short-term memory issues, and to be honest, and I'm kind of ashamed to admit this because I don't think I was thinking clearly at the time. Obviously, my brain was a little scrambled, but I made the conscious decision not to go to the hospital, not to do anything, because I didn't have coverage that could cover that kind of thing. I didn't have any insurance that would give me a lot of assistance with that. So I was looking in the thousands and thousands of dollar range to get an MRI. And I had talked to a few people in sports medicine and some people who were in Canada who were like, "Why wouldn't you go to the doctor?" "Oh, that's right, it's not free." So I knew somebody who got hit with a hockey puck. They went to the doctor. Yeah, they had a concussion. It sounds like you got a concussion. There's nothing they can do for you. And so I literally went home and I slept off a concussion that could have killed me. And so these are things that, as Americans, we have to think about. And as I think about that, I think, man, why is that? Why do we have to make that decision when every other country in the world doesn't have that same decision to make? And why is it that every single country in the world doesn't have to be really afraid of doctors? Because it's not. I'm also afraid of doctors, not because of the implements, the tools that they use, or any of the procedures that they utilize, but because I don't know whether they're telling me is correct information, or it's motivated by the fact that the prescription drug industry is so far in their pockets that they're just trying to push prescriptions down my throat. I don't know if I can trust the fact that it's a privatized business as opposed to a real institution that's got my best interest in mind. So as I'm sitting here deciding whether or not I need to go to the doctor for a concussion or for a head cold, for something that's so insignificant, yet our bodies are so complicated that it could be something very serious hiding beneath the surface. Why do I have to live in fear of being able to pay for these things, being able to trust the professionals who are implementing them? And the third point is, how confident am I going into a doctor's appointment on how much out of pocket I will be paying? Is there any real understanding of how my plan works in relation to this doctor, this procedure, this network, this coverage?
No.
There's not. I would
doubtful.
never have any idea. Every single time I leave the doctor's office, I say, "Oh, well, that's less or more than I thought I would be paying." I have more certainty when I go to the vet with my dog than I do for anything with me or my wife.
It's so messed up, but true.
It's a terrifying reality. But this is why there is no other option in my mind. In my opinion, there is no keeping people on the plans that they love, because the plans that they love are based around a broken system. And that broken system needs to be taken out and replaced with a system that's proven all around the world. Proven by statistics, by evidence, by budgeting, by implementation. It's not going to happen overnight, but there's only a few people up on that stage tonight who really stood for that. And those are the people that I think have the right idea when it comes to healthcare.
And it's interesting, like, Jonathan, you may understand, just because I know you lived elsewhere. And I can tell you, coming from a military family, like, I am amazed at how many of us Americans really don't understand this, because we never had the benefit of travel to get out, go elsewhere. But look, before you knock it, before you say anything, you need to leave the United States, go take yourself a nice little world trip, pay a little visitation. I hate for you to get hurt and have to go to a doctor there. But my aunt, my dad, a lot of them that serve in the military, they can tell you, look, you think there's crap systems everywhere? No. Germany, Canada, quite a few of them, no, they got it together. Yes, you want to be there. And it's just interesting to me, like the fear mongering that we do here. And I guess like I just have a moral clash with profiting off of, things like, like to me, like the EpiPens, like a prime example, because it's not too distant past of where the price is skyrocketed. Right. And it's like, wait a minute, why are the prices skyrocketing? Like, this is crazy to me. Like, no, like at some point, like how can somebody sleep at night knowing that it's going to cost an absurd amount of money? And then I literally had people tell me, well, Terrence, if you did the R&D and the time, you get to choose and set the price. And I'm like, yeah, there's got to be limitations there. Like, I mean, that's the case with everything business-wise. I mean, there's nothing more absurd than medical costs. When I can go and look at, let's say, my detailed billing when we gave birth to Knox, right? And I mean, Advil's like $30 or whatnot. Like, really, like a pill of Advil, $30. Like ambulance rides. Again, I read this national statistics where they can range anywhere from like $340 all the way up to mid 2000s, right? Just for a quick ambulance ride, depending on where you live. And at some point you got to ask, like, okay, like what's really going on with that? And Rudy, I don't know if you knew this, but there's somebody from Canada on this call now. And when you say Canada, they have to wait months to get procedures done? No.
And no, in some cases they do. And a lot of those, though, are elective procedures. And a lot of those are procedures that are not life-threatening. There's a huge fear-mongering that happens outside of inside the United States about Canada that is disproven in almost every Canadian major city, which is that for important operations, for significant life-altering operations, there's a significant wait time. That is not the case.
No, and that's why you have to call it out, because it's like I don't consider plastic surgery to get a nose job to be something of dire need, and those things get mixed in.
When we say elective surgeries, it's less about like cosmetic things. That's obviously considered an elective surgery in the United States. In Canada, elective surgery would also be a non-life-threatening surgery, so an operation. So if I was to injure my shoulder playing hockey, and it was something that was going to make it so I couldn't work, I couldn't live my life, I couldn't do anything, and I went in to go get a surgery, the wait time would be on average about the same in Canada as it is in the United States. However, if it was a minor surgery, if it was something like my shoulder was messed up, but I was still able to live my life, I was still able to do things that wasn't significant, the doctor's recommendation, the prescription of the consultation of the doctor might get you a longer wait time for that. That may be the case. But in my city, where I used to get operations done when I got hockey injuries, and where my dad got operations done when he ruined his hand at work, there was no wait time. He was in and out every single time, surgery, operations, emergency room, everything. Not only are you in a place where people value healthcare as a normal part of life and as a normal aspect of everyday, just walk, like you have a lunch break, sometimes during your lunch break, you just go to the doctor. And you have to wait in the office for a minute, but everybody there is waiting in the same office with the same lunch break and the same plans that you've got. And it's just a normal part of life. So people understand it, they respect it a little bit more, there's more organization to the process, and you appreciate and you trust the doctors that you are seeing. There's no level of concern of whether or not the doctor you're seeing is trying to get you to spend more money, because there is no money, because there's no profiting involved whatsoever. So there's a definite sense of security, and even if there's a wait time, let's say I have a shoulder surgery that I have to get taken care of because it makes it really, really tough for me to live my life. I guarantee you're not going to go into a doctor in the United States and get that shoulder surgery scheduled any faster than you would in Canada. You're not going to have that surgery tomorrow. You're not going to have it next week. You're going to be looking 2, 3, 4 weeks down the road in any country you go to, whether it's in the United States or Canada.
Yeah, and to me, that's not unreasonable, right? Like if it's not a dire need, but I for the value, for the fact that it's not going to bankrupt my personal pocket, right? Like I could wait 2 or 3 weeks if it's non-life threatening. And not only that, but you usually schedule stuff like that anyway. Like who just randomly on a dime says, oh yeah, I'm going to go get LASIK done and I'm just going to do it today or do it Friday and today's Monday, right? Like you plan those things out. So personally, I don't find that unreasonable at all. What I do find unreasonable is a current system in the U.S. that we call medical attention that we give to people, and I think it's crazy. Like something's got to give, not going to work. I'm so curious though, like on Jonathan, like talking about geriatrics or whatnot. His dad was in the hospital like 4 months in Britain, right? So I'd be very curious to hear like kind of Britain's take on it and some differences there. So that would be really interesting. It'd be nice if we could verbally hear you, but nonetheless.
So I do want to highlight one thing
Sure.
I said in the comments earlier. So specifically about bankruptcy, because I got a text message from somebody who's listening to the show right now who had a question about this as well. One of the things about bankruptcy that people don't understand is, and just generally credit reports that people don't have a great grasp on because we haven't done a great job educating our country about this. Credit scores do not necessarily reflect everything that is involved with your financial standing. A credit score is a good overall view of where you're at as far as what creditors would view you as far as a risk, right? But if there is a bankruptcy on your file, it is harder for you to get your credit score because you're a higher risk. But for 10 years after you file bankruptcy, for a full decade after you file bankruptcy, you are automatically a higher risk, even if your credit score does not indicate that. And any creditor who supplies you with a personal loan or a signature loan or any sort of unsecured loan is going to have bankruptcy on your credit report shown to you, and they're going to be able to use that as a definition or as a decision on your loan. You could walk into a bank with an 800 credit score or a 770 credit score and have a 10-year bankruptcy and be in the 7th year of that bankruptcy, and they can turn you away. And most of the time they will turn you away if that loan is significant because you are a much higher risk despite what your credit score says. So there is no real advantage. In some cases that you could argue that there may be an advantage, but isn't that conversation so messed up that you have to decide whether you're going to financially cripple yourself or your financial responsibility, your financial standing within creditors for a full decade because you have medical bills, because you have something that was not forced upon you by anything but God's will? Isn't that just so horrible that you have to decide to physically cripple your financial standing within any sort of credit agency because that's the best option, as opposed to owing this money and crippling yourself financially elsewhere? Yes, it's an option. Yes, it's designed for that purpose. There's somebody I know in the White House who touts the fact that they've had 17 or 18 bankruptcies because there's a financial benefit to it. But there's not. It's not a good option. It's a bad option. That's why it's the last resort. But if you have to look at it as the first resort because the other resort is so bad, why are we making that decision? Why are we forcing ourselves to ask to be in that line of thought to say, is this the best option for me? That's the issue. That's what really needs to be taken on. And that's where you start with insurance agencies. You start with prescription drugs. You start at the top. You start with the people who are profiting more than anybody else in this country, in this industry. And you take them on. And that's when you start to see medical bills go down. You start to see that decision become less and less about your personal finances.
And by the way, like another interesting point that happened to the debate that really stood out to me, it was when Senator Warren with the guy that was next to her, I forget, but he would be in that higher bracket of her proposed plan. And so they put him on the spot. They're like, okay, so they asked him, would he agree to Senator Warren's, obviously higher tax? And I thought that was so interesting because it's the people that seem to want to protect, like, the extreme wealthy the most are like the middle class people, right? Like in some sort of weird alternative universe that they're just going to mail an ATM to your house and they're just going to make it rain on you for being such a good loyalist. Whereas most that I've seen that in public that were put on the spot about like really using tax to their advantage would all say the same thing. And to the like these millionaires and billionaires, to their credit, they say something that I happen to agree with, which might be controversial, but what they say is pretty much, look, if you want to tax us more, the tax us more. But if you're not going to, we're not going to pay it, right? Like, what idiot is going to say, oh, hey, this is not philanthropy here? Like, if I'm not going to give away all this money if no one else is going to necessarily do it, right? So like if you want to close these tax loopholes, then do it, and then as a business, like we will deal with that and we will pay for it. But if you're not going to, then why would we? And I have to say, like, I see the logic in that, right? It's like saying if I wanted to do something nice for my community, it's one thing if you say, well, Terrence, you want to volunteer something if I happen to, be a billionaire. I may, volunteer some things here and there, but if there's other billionaires on the table and I feel like I'm the one that giving away all the money, I'm going, but wait a minute, hold on for a second. Like, why would I put myself at risk here if not everyone else is going to do it? Right? So bottom line is most people want to do the right thing. Most of them do agree that they should pay more taxes, but because the law states that it doesn't have to, then why would they? Like, they got this money for a reason to begin with, and that's because they were smart with money, and it would be very silly of them to be the only ones just, in a sense, like donating or giving it away if people aren't going to be smart enough to tax them. Right? Like, prime example, Amazon. Right? Like, I hit Amazon all the time, but I have to say, like, it's not Jeff Bezos' fault, right? Like, Jeff is just doing what all the other billionaires do, right? You make more money, period, bottom line. And again, Apple, the rest of them will tell you the same thing. Taxes, they're super low. You should raise them. But until you do, we're just going to do what's smart for us financially for our stakeholders and not. So what's going on with that, right? So I just find it so funny that people all the time, right? Like, oh, you're going to punish, these millionaires and billionaires. Really? Really? I want you to go look at Facebook. I'm going on a rant right now. Go look at Facebook right now with their $5 billion fine. And you know what Mark Zuckerberg did? Yeah, he went between his couch cushions and pulled it out. Do you think he's going to change his ways? No, because you know what? It still makes him money. Flat out, period. So people, get with it. Stop making excuses for these companies. Because trust me, if you were to tax them, guess what? They're still going to do the same exact thing because they're still winning at the end of the day, bottom line. So I just don't understand that argument. It's just crazy to me.
Yeah, and just to finish up the conversation on creditors, I got called out again. This is like a record for how many times I called out in one episode. Jonathan, just because you have not had any issues with buying a car, I'm happy for you. Every creditor, every credit agency in this country has 10 questions, 10 plus questions, usually it's 10 to 12 questions, that they will ask, specifically declaration-based questions, where they will ask you things like, have you ever been involved in party to a lawsuit? Have you ever filed for divorce? Have you been separated recently? Have you filed for bankruptcy, and what chapter of bankruptcy was it? If you've answered yes to that question and you've had no problem getting a credit loan of any kind in this country in the last, 6 to 10 years of filing for bankruptcy, then you are one of the lucky ones, my friend, because it's probably more based on how much money you have with that financial institution, how much history you have with certain creditors, how much relationship you have with those creditors. There's a number of things that will give you a reason on a decision on the loan that underwriters will look at. And maybe for you, the bankruptcy thing hasn't been an issue, but if you do the research and if you look into it, bankruptcy will be on your credit report for 10 years. And every single time you get a loan, they ask that question, because if you say yes to that loan, there are creditors out there who will automatically disqualify you for it.
But, look, I don't know if you ever heard Jonathan speak, but, I mean, his brilliant accent. I mean, who's going to tell this guy no? Are you kidding me?
I can't speak to that.
I could hear Jonathan talk all day. Not that man crushed on you, Jonathan. I love you. But, like, it's like when I see, like, for instance, that these companies pay, a lot in employee taxes. Well, yeah, but, I mean, this is already worked in of, like, for instance, like when a business pays taxes, well, customers at the end of the day pay for everything, right? One way or another. And so when they go in, it's like, okay, when I go into a store and I buy something, I pay taxes on it. But think about it, I was taxed twice. My paycheck got taxed. Then I get taxed and I go buy something. As a matter of fact, you were to take the same money and just exchange hands, you would end up with nothing, right? Think about it. Like, if I were to technically exchange hands with you, Jeremy, like, there should be a certain tax involved, especially if you're a company, right? And you send it back. Like, Uncle Sam's got to take his piece. Everyone's taking a piece of this pie. So they definitely already have that under wraps. Like, they know what they're doing. They got that locked down. But I just find it very interesting that, again, most of them would agree that they want to pay, that they should pay, but again, because they're legally not obligated to, they're doing what's smart for them and for the business. And look, I have to say, like, I totally understand that. Like, I get it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the point of these businesses and the taxes that they really should be paying, that's the part that the end all be all to the discussion is if you are making money in this country as a private citizen, you're paying taxes on it. So why those people who are making more money and should be paying more taxes are able to get out of it? That's the issue, right? So once you attack that or get onto that, then you start to see some of that equality come into play, and you see those responsibilities go a little bit more. But you're right; it's not going to change their behaviors. It's not going to change the way they do it. In fact, it's probably going to get them to do more, cut more staff, to
Yeah, that
lower
already
wages,
happens
and then
now.
they're going to struggle as a company, and that's how capitalism works. That's
Already
why it should be
happens
in
now,
place.
right? It's like,
Yeah.
they're never satisfied, always wanting more money, right? Like the human nature of it. And I would challenge the fact when people say, oh, well, if you tax them more, then they're just going to either A, pass it on to consumers, right? Or B, that they won't innovate and won't have any jobs. And I think none of those are true. I think those are very false. And the reason why I say this, first and foremost, that you can only raise it so much, right? Like, look at right now with the whole trade war situation we have going on. A lot of these companies are eating those costs because if you keep rising them, there's a lot of goods that consumers can do without. And if you push them too far, guess what? Just not going to pay it flat out, right? And then what are you going to do? So there are limitations to that. So no, they can't just jack it up to infinity. And then last on that particular thought process is when people say, oh, they're not going to innovate, they're not going to bring jobs, that's not necessarily true either, right? It's like, think about it. Okay, a bonus. If you ever get a bonus with a company, it is not normal tax. Here, at least in the state of Georgia, right? I don't know what it is in Dallas, there may be differences here, but here I get, it's like 40 or 45% tax. My bonus, but that doesn't keep me from not trying to perform and not trying to get more money, right? I have a higher tax on my bonus than a lot of these companies do. And did that slow me down and deter me? No, because guess what, folks? Money is money. They're still gonna make it. So to think that people are just gonna throw in the towel and give up as an alternative to what?
Yeah.
And this has been done in our history before. How do you think these highways and whatnot has gotten done? Do you think that just happened? Uncle Sam just forking a whole bunch of money over? Sure, after they had a very high tax rate, oh gosh, now I'm losing my mind, tax rate over, what was that? I want to say the 60s, 70s when this occurred. I know there's a high corporate tax from the 50s to the 70s, and it kind of tempered on down. But yeah, you should go look it up because it's very interesting. It's not what you think it is. Just like colleges. Guess what? State colleges, those used to be free, right? Those used to be a part of your education. One of my favorites when I talk to my Korean counterparts, wait a minute, Terrence, why do you go from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade and all of a sudden the education stops? Like, there's no real reason for that, everyone. And guess what? If you got money and you're elite, then you can go to Harvard. Harvard doesn't need to be open for everybody. You can have an exclusive college club if you want, cool. But there should be some sort of baseline, especially if we want to be in a race, we want to keep ranting, rah, rah, American flags, we're the best, we're the best. But you know what? If this education's not up to par, if we got a society that's more distracted and not outputting more than ever, and we got other countries that are really coming in, taking the knowledge, which, by the way, don't say they're stealing the education because they're paying for it. We got what we wanted through that transaction, then you can't be mad when we're being outperformed. And that ultimately will have an effect on our place in the world as an influencer. Bottom line. But anyways, rant over.
That was a good rant, and I couldn't agree more. I think that's probably one of the things that the conversation needs to go more towards as well, is the idea that adding technology to a workforce will remove jobs, and that's a horrible thing. If you go to McDonald's right now, you can either go to the register or you can go to one of these stand-up things.
Checkouts,
and I personally go to the stand-up checkouts just because it's easier for me. It's a little bit less pressure. There's usually no line.
And the order's
is it a bad thing that they're going to lose cashiers at McDonald's or people at McDonald's? Probably not, because those people are going to go get a different job. They're going to have more opportunities. They won't be working at McDonald's. They're going to be working at some other establishment, some other company. That's how capitalism works. It grows. With technology, with innovation, things get better. They don't get worse. So there's negative connotations all throughout that whole discussion that I think could be rewritten and repurposed. And to your point, a lot of that is based around the decisions of those large companies.
Mm-hmm. And to Jonathan here, like, electric cars is going to kill jobs. And you know what? Like, he's right. Like, to a degree, it certainly will. And there's a lot of jobs it can kill. And the only thing is, it's so interesting to me because I find it very interesting the way we value these things and then how we sometimes, take inaction because we're afraid of that change. Like, so electric cars, there's a few things here. First off, your mechanic is virtually obsolete, right? Like, you have a few of them around, but like Tesla, their service intervals of what, 2 years now, minus the tires. Brakes, what they regenerative brakes and whatnot, like it lasts a lifetime as a car. As a matter of fact, if you, let's say, a lithium battery these days has 1,000 recharge cycles. And if you got 350 miles to the charge, do the math. That is 350,000 miles the car would have to have before arguably you can get rid of the battery, which is more than what most people drive the car to begin with. So like a lot of our like scary time thoughts, we can't make it, this won't work. Like, could you imagine if we went back in time for a second, right? Like, since we're just on a whole topic of America, imagine going back to 1776 with a computer or a cell phone or anything. And it's like, this would be unimaginable. But at some point, it's not like we just crossed over from nothing to something, right? It's like man started off by themselves, and they had horses, and we had like steam power, then, Ford came out, right? And these things are very incremental steps to where we've gotten. And there's no doubts here that certain things are going to kill jobs as a loop, but they also spawn jobs as well. Because you got to think about, like, how are these things going to get powered? Parts, sourcing. There's all sorts of things that can come from it. But this is where, like, the ingenuity of just America in general, this is where we do best. And so I guess I kind of take that point. Elizabeth Warren stands out in my mind with this one of, we got to stop talking about what we can't do per se, but what we can do, in other words. And look, we've got to move on because it's going to go. Like, if I sit here and I worry about my job all the time, right? Like, I got to go make sure I have the proper education. I stay up to date. Like, we behave as if you go to college, you're one and done. No, learning is an ongoing thing. So for 1 second, I think, for instance, if somebody has a degree from 1989, right, in, let's say, the medical field, they have a degree, would you still want them to be a doctor if they haven't practiced in 10 years? Like, absolutely not, right? Like, you'd want them to be fresh. Like, these things have to be updated. And you know what? The same thing's going to happen with all of our jobs. Look, nothing is secure. We know the saying, there's with two things in life that's guaranteed, death and taxes, right? And it's a true statement. And so I don't want to say that I'm not empathetic towards any of our brothers and sisters that certainly have these fears and those issues. But this is where I just think socially, like, we have to support people. We have to support those industries and say, hey, yes, we're going to have to move on, but we come up with some sort of like alliance to say, but you know what? We're going to power you through that education. We're going to work through to make sure that you have some sort of stability to get to this new platform that we're going to move to. Because guess what? The world is going to move on, whether we like it or not. It's just like AI, right? Oh, we can't do AI. Well, guess what? We can say we're not going to do AI as America, but it's going to come. Somebody's going to do it one way or another. You're not going to stop progress. It will happen. You can choose to adapt with it, or as they say in the old science biology class, right? You either adapted or you perished.
Yep.
Same's going to go. We're a very young country. Don't lose sight.
And one of the things that, just to completely go off of the rails on this one, over the weekend, there was a tournament at Arthur Ashe Stadium, the Fortnite World Cup. A 16-year-old kid, I think he was, won $3 million in prizes playing video games. If that doesn't tell you how far we have advanced from the way that we used to be when it comes to technology and youth, and as far as what they can do, man, we're going to be okay. We're going to be just fine.
We all have, like, everybody I think is on right now, like, we've all heard it from our parents at one point. Video games is going to rot your brain, right? You can't make any money or living off a video game. Yeah, go tell the developers of Fortnite that. Free on your phone, by the way, but the rolling in dough. Or this kid, again, 16-year-old, and what? I'm sorry, say it into my little ear canister again. How much money was that, Jeremy? How much money was that?
$3 million.
Yeah, $3 million more than a lot of us may make in our lifetime, right? Crazy from a game. So, again, who would have thought?
New York took 1.5, by the way.
Well, hey, they paid more taxes. He paid more taxes than Amazon did.
Yeah. He paid more taxes on that than Amazon, Facebook, and everybody did combined.
Think about that. All right, so look, everyone. I know it's getting late. Like, how long have we been on here, Jerry? Like,
you said it was going to be an hour.
I know. I feel like between you and I, we're like incapable at this point. I think we're going.
It's not going to ever happen. We're never going to be able to.
Oh my god. Okay. Not as bad as I thought. It's only an hour and 38 minutes. So rolling to an hour and 39. But look, At this point, I know we got to be doing these things a little bit earlier. That's for sure. Jonathan, one more. Yeah, they're now calling video game addiction a disease. So funny to me.
I think there's discussion around that. As a gamer, as an avid user of the video games, I would say gaming addiction might be something that you could justify. But I could stop whenever I want to, Jonathan. That's the point I'm making.
And look, and I got to be honest as well. Like, I could argue. There's so many deep routes I can go with this. Like, this will be a topic we have to pick up.
Topic on that one.
On another time, because as somebody who owns now a Nintendo Switch, and I'm slightly addicted, I'd say there's more things like sugar. There's so many things that are addicting. We'll have to come back. We'll have to revisit this one. Okay. So, anyways, with that, we need to go ahead and bow out, Jeremy, for sure. But we got to do this one earlier. But look, the debates happened so late tonight. We didn't want to wait till later time. We just wanted to do it and just get out the gate while it's fresh on our minds.
Tune in tomorrow night, round 2. Another 10 candidates.
Yeah, a little earlier. So we're going to do it again tomorrow. Let's not even fool ourselves. All right, we're going to do it again tomorrow. All right, you all. Well, hopefully you'll be around.
In Seattle, so we're definitely doing something tomorrow.
Okay, we're doing it tomorrow. All right. Yeah. All right. Talk to you all later. Good night.
See ya.